Hey everyone, welcome into Pro Football Ireland. I cannot believe it's week 17 of the season already. We have got 2 weeks of the regular season left. Michael McQuaid, Mark Hogan, Michaela Fagan, hope you've enjoyed your Christmas, and by the time the new year comes around, we will only have one episode of Red Zone left after Sunday night. So it's a big time, it's an emotional time. Mark, obviously welcome in first, mates. We're getting closer to you getting the first rounds in Arizona in a few weeks' time. Have you prepared your bill accordingly, or how are you feeling?
I had it sorted until a week ago, and then Christmas came along, and that went out the window. The budget didn't quite stack up how I had planned, so we'll see. Maybe we'll be on the waters early on in Arizona, and certain results will need to go our way before we go to be getting anything stronger than that.
Talking about water, it could be like Ibiza where you pay like €19 for a bottle of water in a nightclub.
Yeah, right.
Michaela, did you have a good Christmas? I know we were chatting, sort of reviewing the games. It seems like 5 minutes ago, but it's crazy how this end to the season's flying in, isn't it? It's really coming out. It's coming around to the big moments now, and we've got some great matchups this weekend and some even better matchups in week 18.
We've a lot of games to look forward to, especially I'm looking forward to the most the Jaguars and the Titans to see if the Jaguars can actually pull off that underdog story and get into the playoffs and win the AFC South, because that'd be incredible from a team who got the first overall pick last year. They had the worst record last year. So it's really, really exciting times coming up, and I'm sad that the season's going to be over in February.
It's not over yet, but yes, we're getting emotional. Before we start this off, if you're listening on the podcast, thank you so much. And if you're watching, hey, how's the form? Um, just to let people know, as of the time of recording, we are going to welcome Jeff Reinbold from Sky Sports, from Hawaii football and many other locations. Coach for 30 odd years in the NFL, college football, Canadian football. I think, sorry, not the NFL. Sorry, Jeff, but we're bringing him to Belfast on the 2nd of February. You can check out the link in the bio below if you want to come. At the time of recording, the tickets may be sold out by the time you've listened to this. However, not to worry, we're going to try and get into Dublin as well. That's before Arizona for the Super Bowl. That is 2nd of February. Do hit us up on Twitter at NFL Ireland if we can help. Let's jump into some of the main storylines this week in the NFL. And Mark, this is a story that I didn't think I'd bring it up again this season. I certainly didn't think I'd be talking in this situation, but Tua has officially suffered his second concussion of the season. I seen the play. I actually only seen the play on Tuesday morning, and the Dolphins. It wasn't recognised by the Dolphins, and again, it was frankly poor management and poor medical care from a Dolphins team that frankly should now know better after the Cincinnati. I think it was Cincinnati on Thursday Night Football from memory. Um, I feel sorry for Tua in the sense of, realistically, his season is over. If his season isn't over, it's at the time of recording, we're expecting Teddy Bridgewater to play on Sunday, and that will be the case. But, when you've got 1 week left of the season, you have to prioritize this lad's health, surely. And, I guess it goes into a conversation. You look at a guy like Andrew Luck that played beaten up for years, and his sudden departure from the league. Would you be surprised if Tua did consider his future? And I know I'm going into different questions here now. I'll leave it on this. Could we see Tom Brady play in Miami next year? Apparently he's got a legal document which states that he must take care of his children for 3 days of the week. So being in Florida, it might actually help him. It's a very sad situation for Tua.
I hadn't really thought about what he called it, a career. It is at the point now where it's a bit, yeah, definitely unfortunate. You don't want to become, the moniker thrown on you that you're prone to anything, especially injury. But when it comes to concussions, I know I suffer from migraines, and the worst things in the world, and the migraines that come along with concussions are brutal. So, he's sitting there and he's going through this. So, I mean, it's up to him. When it comes to the actual sport, I think he's clearly competitive, or else he'd be removing himself off the field, right? Because it's the problem that we're having with this is that the concussion protocol didn't kick in on time. It was after the game that the news comes out that he was displaying symptoms, and again he somehow managed to get back on the field. And that was the problem against the Bengals earlier on this season, and why it kicked off. Now the Dolphins are way cuter with how they're dealing with this time. Mike McDaniels obviously was first time around. He said the wrong things in the beginning, and he wanted to let it be known that he was on the side of the player. Now he is saying Tua needs to prioritize his health. It's that's the kind of statements that he's making. And the team as a whole has kind of gone, which it's good to see the development. I see from that point of view. I do think when it comes to the NFLPA, they seem to be like the opposition in government, where they're supposed to scream from the houses about what's wrong, but they're not actually doing enough in the moment, because it's very easy for them to get on their soapbox after something has happened and say, oh yeah, we need the changes, and look, the changes will come in the offseason. The NFLPA has been great at advocating for change, but at the end of the day, they do need to be getting on to the likes of Tua and say, you need to remove yourself from the game if they really mean business. So as it goes for the Dolphins, obviously still in the playoff hunt, they go to Teddy Bridgewater, who himself was removed with a concussion earlier on in the season as well. So it's very difficult for Miami Dolphins, but it is one of those things that becomes a bit bigger in the sport, right? It's like, yeah, to his play dropped off, etc. When it looked like he took that hit, but it's not just the play; it's that we're worried about. It obviously is his future. So when you ask there, does he pack it in? I don't think so. I think that he has clearly demonstrated that he's too competitive. He's too young, and probably that comes along with that is being a bit more naive. You don't often see players do what Andrew Luck did, and at least Andrew Luck did it when he was 29 years of age. And obviously, to this day, they are writing documentaries, and still people are in disbelief that he did step away. Tua has just gotten a taste of what it's like to be liked in the NFL. You know, obviously he had a tough couple of seasons where people are calling him a bust, and would he be able to make that decision of leaving the NFL on his own terms? So I don't think he steps away. I don't think it's the end of a season either. Because obviously he'll be fighting to get back in. It did take him a while to clear the concussion protocol the last time around. We don't actually really know how bad this one is, because he did play on the remainder of that game the other day. But yeah, if they're obviously to make the playoffs and that, I think he finds a way back into the game.
Michaela, it's a very difficult decision for Miami, both short term and long term. Obviously, short term, you got Teddy Bridgewater coming in as quarterback, and we've seen that Teddy can be reliable in certain situations. I, as a Broncos fan, know that as much as anybody in this conversation. And I like Teddy. I wish Teddy all the best, but surely we have to prioritize someone's health now over a potential, as it stands, Kansas City game. As it stands, of course, that could be Kansas City, that could be the Bills, depending on what happens in this week's action and next week's action. But they're going to face a difficult team. So for the sake of the safety of the quarterback, would it make sense to at least stand Tua down for the season and give him the time to at least maybe have a thought about his future? Or what's your thoughts on this situation?
I think Tua should reasonably consider, okay, he's had two concussions in the one season, and the Miami Dolphins were slated, and deservedly so, how they handled the first concussion he got. But when I talk about the NFL with some people, they don't, the first thing they think of is, oh, I've watched these documentaries or I've listened to these podcasts about the concussions in the NFL and how it was years and years ago, before like it was kind of like, what's the word, like before it was brought to light, basically, about what the players suffered and how they suffered after their careers. And obviously there's been steps to make sure that doesn't happen anymore. But it's such a serious thing that I personally think that Tua shouldn't play for the rest of the season, even if the Miami Dolphins were, 15-0 and they hadn't lost the game and he was MVP and stuff like that. He kind of has to come out now, because like two concussions is a bit much for me personally, and I wouldn't blame him if he started questioning whether he should kind of give it up, because in the end he got, like, his dream came true. Like, he played in the NFL, he would have got a very high paying contract that would look after him for the rest of his life. So there's no, like, if you kept him playing in the NFL and he played another 2 or 3 years and he didn't live up to his own expectations and then damaged his body or his brain in the process, then like it wouldn't be worth it. He would just tell himself, I should have just stopped. But I, like Mark, I don't see him leaving the league next year. I don't see him retiring. But I think if he was to get a concussion next year, he'd have to seriously consider it, because I think 3 is the main number everyone thinks of for concussions. I think they say if you get 3, then you have to stop for your own health.
I think there's some, and we are in no way medical or liability or insurance experts, folks, and we have no affiliation with the NFL, in case anyone is watching what is thinking. I think there is some sort of situation, some sort of issue if he got to like week 3 or 4 of the season next year, and if he did suffer another concussion, I think there is some sort of liability in his contract there. He is on a base sort of $48 million salary, which is considerable, but I guess he would be looking at the Justin Herberts, the Patrick Mahomes especially, and he would be trying to get a contract as high as that there. So it really is one to look at over the next few weeks and months. But I know we all, and there's plenty of Dolphins fans in Ireland that wish Tua the very, very best, and hopefully the Dolphins make the right decision, not just for their franchise, but for the man himself. So it's going to be an interesting few weeks. Can Teddy lead the Dolphins far in the playoffs, folks? Yes, no? I'm going to say no. Mark, my friend, you are on mute, and I'm just going to keep it like this now.
It's been a week long Christmas, all right. Right? But no, I think like the run game was established under McDaniels. That's why he came in. That's what made them so successful. It was setting up the pass game. So it depends on the matchup that they get. They can still play well. The defense still exists. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill still exists. Teddy Bridgewater has proved capable, obviously, in the past. I don't think they're a complete write-off. It's not what Dolphins fans would obviously want to be going in with, but like I definitely think they're still in play. They're never going to be favored, and we're not going to talk about them beating the Bills, Bengals, Chiefs. For no one's predicting that. But can they be fun? Can you see them beating the Chargers? You don't even know. They could still end up playing the Patriots or one of these teams along the way. I think that they can still win a game with Teddy Bridgewater.
Interesting. And Michaela, I guess, when you've got Tyreek Hill for a start, you've got Jalen Waddle. All you got to do is put some sort of serviceable quarterback in there, and bingo, you can't cover both at the same time. So
the Dolphins could do a lot worse than Terry Bridgewater. We saw that when he was a backup for the Saints and he had to come in and he won a lot of his games, and then he got a contract with was it Denver? Did he go to after the Saints, or was it the Panthers? He's been everywhere.
And then he thought that he was going to get $26 million, and then that didn't work out. But I wish Teddy the very, very best. He seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, they could be going in with a lot like a worse quarterback. So I would support. Like, I don't think just because Teddy comes in that their playoff hopes will be over. I don't think they'd get far with him, but they could probably win a wild card game or something like that. He's a decent quarterback.
The next topic that we're going to look at is the Green Bay Packers. Now, why are we talking about the Packers again? I hear half the league ask, but because the Packers are in a situation where if they win both their games, they are in the playoffs. The Packers play the Vikings this weekend, and then they host the Lions next weekend. In no harm to the crack here, I almost want the Packers to win this weekend because you want that week 18 matchup. So I'm just going to put it out there now. The Vikings are a great team, and we're going to talk about them down the stretch here. What they've done with O'Connell this season has been superb. But for me, I want to see Green Bay win this week and take Dan Campbell next week and see what happens. The main problem that I have with Green Bay at the minute, though, Mark, is their offense. They go up against the Dolphins on Christmas Day, an enjoyable game for a neutral. But, they left points out in the field, and it wasn't good enough. Now, if you look at the base data, like Rodgers has one interception in the game. They just couldn't get it done. There was no run game, or a very, very limited run game. They were 2 for 5 in the red zone. They didn't look comfortable. 2 for 4 in go-to-goal situations. And there was too much of a reliance placed in Mason Crosby. You are not going to win in this league, certainly in the playoffs, with play like that. So I can see why Packers fans are concerned. As it stands, if they went in as a 7th seed, they would at the moment be playing Minnesota, who are the 2nd seed. Niners are the 3rd seed at the moment. So it's going to mix and change. If you're a Packers fan, you clearly have concerns there, Mark, but you also have concerns about who you could play. Obviously, you play to beat the best, but as it stands at the minute, it looks like they're playing the Vikings or the Niners, and I don't want to be touching the Niners outside of the championship game in a few weeks.
Well, look, the one that they could be playing is the Vikings, and that's where this all started week 1, right? When the Vikings out of nowhere beat them on Sunday Night Football, when we were all probably asleep thinking that the Packers were going to win it handy, and why were the schedule makers doing it to us? The Packers go into this game in the weekend 3.5-point favorites. Why would that change if they go and beat them this weekend and you're going into the playoffs and you meet them again? Like, the whole thing is that the Vikings are frauds, right? So when you talk about the Packers fans being concerned, well, they were concerned in week 4, 5, 6 when we were pulling the plug on them, and like people were doing podcasts and we probably fell into it ourselves. We're like, there's no way the Packers are going to go out of this. The graphics been going around by, I think, CBS or Fox, one of these people, that they had a 3% chance to make the playoffs only 3 weeks ago, and now it's up to a 1 in 3 chance. So it's massive what they've been able to do. Do I have faith in them? I definitely have a lot more faith than I do around now. Do I have faith in what Matt LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers have proven to us over the last few years? Yes, I think you have to go with what is tried and tested. So if they're able to sneak in, that's the trope that will go against the likes of the Vikings. So how is Kirk Cousins going to play in prime time? How he's going to play in playoff prime time, which is even the next step again. And when they're playing well on offense, I suppose, look, you have to be worried about the status of Christian Watson if you're a Packers fan. I don't know if he's day to day or what at the moment. I know it's Wednesday we're recording this on, and he's not practicing yet. So we know when he emerged, again, he came out of injury. So look, talk about an injury-prone guy. It's definitely Christian Watson. But as soon as he started playing, and look, we talked about him a few weeks ago, I put out the graphic that he had so many touchdowns compared to any of these other guys in the last few weeks. And when he's playing as well as he is, that was what the offense was missing. So it's great when that's involved. And then when you flip to the other side of the board, it's like that pass rush is playing a lot better. The defense was kind of like, just playing a bit below. Every player was playing a bit below where they played in 2021, whereas now it seems to be that they're just playing a bit above themselves again. And the Packers' defense is somewhat capable. Like when you look back through their last few games, like they have been scoring points. I suppose that's it at the end of the day. Some teams, they may be leaving points out on there, like you're saying they did against the Dolphins, but then they still won that game last week. Like when I look back to their games, 26 points, 24 points, 28 points, 33 points they scored, 27 points they scored. It's like this offense is scoring once more, and that was the problem at the beginning of the year, that they weren't able to come away with wins. So the Packers at the moment, if they this week, now this seems as a bit of a stretch, it's not completely out of the realm possibility, but if the Lions lost to the Bears, Commanders lost to the Browns, and the Seahawks lost to the Jets, the Packers would be into the number 7 seed. So it's like they're not a million miles away from this at all. I do think I would fancy them against the Packers. I'll probably pick them, against the Vikings this weekend. Which, yeah, I suppose makes it interesting for the rest of us, right?
Absolutely, and Michaela, I'm picking the Packers to beat the Vikings this weekend as well, just for the sheer crack factor in Week 18. And Mark's right, we are recording this on the Wednesday. Things happen when we're recording. It looks as if at the time of recording that Derek Carr will be sitting against the Niners to try and fix up some contract situations this weekend as well. So things happen all the time in this league. One thing you can look at with Christian Watson, Michaela, is the Packers, forgetting about Watson and forgetting about Dobbs, as a team, they do need to try and find different gear. They need to play better. But people will, I guess, some will argue the team were 4-8. They now have a chance as they enter the last few weeks of the season, and I guess fair play to them.
I don't think it's fair play. I'm actually furious that they're into a playoff contention now. I'm kind of like, they started. I know I'm saying,
I
the
genuinely
Lions
think they're a better team than the Giants or Washington football team or Commanders. I think they deserve to be there based on the last month's play, more so than Washington. I think Daniel Jones has got a bit better, and I was impressed with him last week against Minnesota. But I look at that Washington playoff spot at the minute, I think it's a waste. So I agree with what you're saying, but it's a weird situation.
Oh yeah, it's Washington are definitely a waste, and I feel like Washington do sneak into the playoffs every year. But then again, looking at it, the Packers are always in the playoffs every year as well, obviously because they were a top end team in the NFL. They were one of the best. They were probably the best in the NFC, them and the 49ers if you were looking at last season, and then obviously the Rams as well. But to kind of like, if it was the Rams in this situation, I'd still be furious, because I'm like, no, you're a top end team. You should have been in contention the whole time, and the fact that you've just kind of started sneaking in a little bit now is kind of infuriating. I want to mix up sometimes, so I want to see it to be the Lions. I want it to be the Jaguars, even though they could probably get knocked out in the wild card game. It's still interesting, and it just still shows you that these teams and the draft and like it all works, because new teams are getting into the playoffs every year, where it's kind of like, for me, I'm sick of kind of every season the Aaron Rodgers drama, and I'm sick of the same storyline of, they don't have receivers, they don't get receivers for him. So when they were playing poorly, I was kind of like, well, it is surprising. Like, it was obviously surprising, but it's kind of like, I don't feel bad for them, because it's just the same storylines with this team over and over again. No receivers. Aaron Rodgers is thrown a hissy for some reason. He's going to get traded to Denver. So like, I was kind of happy that they kind of fell into the background and they weren't being talked about. And then it's also infuriating that Aaron Rodgers is like, what, MVP twice in a row, and then everyone was hailing him for like the no interceptions thing, and now he's just every time you check his stats or you watch him play a game, he throws an interception. So I was more than happy to not see the Packers in the playoffs this year. But if they do make it into it, like, fair play, they got hot at the right moment. I don't think they deserve it. But I'm going with the Vikings this week.
When you
I
look
don't
at their
think
last few
anybody wants to play.
when you look at their last few games, Michael, like the Packers, when Michaela says that they got hot at the right time, look, the opposition hasn't been amazing. The Dolphins, Rams, Bears, Eagles, their last 3 games, obviously the Eagles are amazing, but they've only conceded 6 points in the fourth quarter since that Eagles game, which was a 44-33 or 44-33 or something. It was a high scoring game. Like they'd put it up to the Eagles. So like when you talk about getting hot, they absolutely did. And they did get the receiver now, as it turns out, with Christian Watson. So when we all say, oh, we want to see that storyline checked, that has been checked off now. So it's like we can't really fault them. We always come back to these storylines, and sometimes it's true laziness, sometimes because the coaching is that good, and the coaching got them out of the hole. That's why we're all so jealous of, why are those teams always there? Why are the Patriots always thereabouts? Why do we put such faith in McVay every single year? Why did we put into the playoff talks Kyle Shannon every single year, even though he hadn't been getting there in his first couple of years with the 49ers? It's because they are that good, and they're proving it again, that when there's hissy fits and all thrown, they worked through it and they're in with a shout. And in this year where so many teams are all kicking themselves saying the playoffs were there for so many teams, it's the Packers that stood up and were counting and said, yeah, actually, we'll take that spot. The Lions were in contention. The Commanders were in contention. The Giants were in contention. But like at the end of the day, the Packers are the ones that are going sorting out business and have given themselves a stretch of 2 games that will get them into the playoffs. It's as simple as that. It's like we can't be jealous. Every team was allowed to do it.
Yeah, I think it's a fair enough point, mate. Like, I mean, I take on board with what you have both said there. I am intrigued by these next 2 weeks. I think the way that the Packers started the season, they went from London to about a month ago, was pretty atrocious in some situations. And I think the way that, and people are giving Mac Jones a lot of guff on the field for the way he's going on. Rodgers has been very direct at some points in the field as well. So look, let's see what happens. I would definitely like to see the Packers in there as a 7th seed, just for, again, the sheer neutral factor. And that goes into our next topic, because I just don't want to be sitting, I'm sorry, in January watching Carson Wentz. I don't have any interest in it. Like, it's not, and to be fair, Taylor Heineke's dead on. Mark, I have no doubt that the Commanders were robbed 2 weeks ago against the Giants. They were. They should have won that game. They didn't. That didn't happen. And that's fair enough. The Giants won the game. There needs to be a sky judge involved there to try and sort that situation out. In that situation, which could cost the team its season, I think it's shocking. But they need a spark now. And Ron Rivera has said this week that they need a spark. Do you believe that Carson Wentz, when he plays against is it the Browns this weekend, that he is going to give this team the spark that it needs? Because for me, it's just not. I just don't see what he can do. I actually, do you know what I'm just going to say it? The Browns will beat the Commanders this weekend. Like, that's the stage I'm at now. You've got some players, right? It's Scary Terry for a start, Dotson, but you need to have a more efficient quarterback. It's weird because Heineke is hot and cold as much as Katy Perry. I just, Carson Wentz is not taking this team to the postseason, or if they get to the postseason based upon the run that they've had and they edge out over the next 2 weeks, they'll go one and done. Please feel free to convince me otherwise. Rant over.
It's crazy how similar this conversation is to when we talked Mike White and Zach Wilson only a couple of weeks ago, isn't it? And I'm going to be on the same side of the fence there that I am now. The former number 2 overall pick, I wasn't interested in him. I wanted to go for the guy that is after really earning it and getting to the field somehow, and it's Taylor Heineke. Look, he wasn't finishing drives as of late. The numbers will show they were stalling big time in the red zone. But at the end of the day, the team rallied around him all season, or as soon as he got in there, fans rallied around him. And talk about a storyline we talked about. Like, I feel like we're sitting here in the middle of August again, talking about what will Carson Wentz bring to this Commanders team. Now, at the beginning of the year, what was it? In the first 2 games, that offense put up 55 points. In the next 4 weeks combined, it was like he put up 47 points. So maybe they're thinking, okay, he proved that he can literally be a spark for a couple of weeks, and then I don't know, maybe Heineke comes in the Reds or in the playoffs again, like we saw when he played Brady and almost knocked them off. So maybe the hope is that because Wentz has been off now with injury, that his arm is better, that his legs are a bit better. I mean, his legs aren't going to be better than Heineke, because the one thing Heineke was able to give you was his mobility allowed him to get out of sacks. But when it comes to Wentz, he should be a bit stronger. And look, when we break it down, Carson Wentz did come into this offense this year. When he went to Indianapolis, it was obviously familiarity with the coaching staff there. So when he went to Indianapolis, it wasn't so much of a jump to when he had to come into Washington and learn a new offense. Maybe the time off, he did study the offensive playbook a bit more and can make more of an impact with it. But when I saw him come in the other day, he was rusty, and it was good to see him shake off the rust as the game went on against the 49ers. But what I paid attention to was the ultra that we probably talked about, you and me, Michael, back week 3, week 4, of who was his favorite target, because he's a real clicky guy, and it was Curtis Samuel. So when you look at when he came in for 2 drives, and let me pull up the numbers: 12 of 16, 123 yards, 6 targets to Logan Thomas, 3 targets to Curtis Samuel. How much does Terry McLaurin get, the playmaker that suddenly came back onto the pitch when Taylor Heineke came on? He only had 1 target. And that was Carson Wentz's problem, that he isn't getting the ball into the best players' hands. And that's going to frustrate the hell out of Washington fans when, come the fourth quarter game on the line, they start booing and hissing because Terry McLaurin has only received, the ball for 10 yards in the whole game. That's what I'm worried about with Carson Wentz, that the offense, he's one of the most dictating quarterbacks, that he just cannot spread it around further than certain guys that he likes. I don't know the impact now that John Dotson will have in the game with him back in when they have to work together. So it's like he just changes everything that Washington would be doing, and it's like it wasn't all to do with Taylor Heineke. Now I feel like it's all going to be to do with Carson Wentz. So just as they get reinforcements with the likes of Chase Young coming back, and he had a promising return, it's like I feel like it's all for nothing, because I just don't think he can win games with Carson Wentz.
Michaela, I'm actually surprised that Chase Young's come back, because I thought at this point of the year that he wouldn't. It's funny, in that sense. Do you think this is a situation where Carson Wentz comes in on Sunday, plays okay for 1 quarter, starts to struggle in the second, and by midway through the second quarter, there's boos, and Rivera puts Taylor Heineke on? Would that be the most Washington thing ever to happen? Because I just feel like that's going to happen, if not this week, next week. It's like, come on,
Yeah, it is. I'm honestly so fed up and annoyed of listening to this Washington quarterback carousel, and also the same with the Jets. The Jets is a little bit more interesting because Zach Wilson's just more new, but I don't understand why everybody sees when Taylor Heineke went in. I think we talked about it when he was starting to start, when Carson Wentz got injured, and I think he had a good couple of games, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he's gonna be, he's great. We love him." And I'm kind of like, he's not getting anywhere. He'll be gone in a couple of games. So bring Carson Wentz back in because Heineke won't be good enough. And then I think it's going to be the same thing for Mike White. Everyone's really excited about Mike White. I think he had that amazing game when Zach Wilson was first out, and then he was brutal for the rest of the season. But after he had that first good game, everyone was like, oh yeah, he's going to give Zach Wilson a run for his money. And I'm kind of looking at Mike White, and I'm looking at Taylor Heineke, and I'm like, they're not going to be the franchise quarterbacks for either of those teams. So everyone, don't hype it up. They're going to play 1 or 2 good games, and then they're just going to be bad, and then they're going to have to bring in the other quarterback that they have sitting there. But Taylor, the only guy that I think is going to be good that people didn't expect to be good is Brock Purdy. I think Brock has been consistently good for however he's played. He's beaten the teams. I think and hope he's going to be the underdog story. But I'm saying it now, Taylor Heineke and Zach White and those guys, they're not. They're just not franchise quarterbacks. So yeah, I don't know. What happened is Carson Wentz will probably, I don't know if he's going to struggle or he's too inconsistent to say for sure. I just know he's never probably going to be a franchise quarterback again. I know that for certain. So yeah, they'll probably switch between the two of them for the rest of the season. But then next year, what are they going to do? Surely they're they have a lot of talent on defense. They have a good they have good talent on offense as well. I really hope they stop wasting their time with these two. I know, in fairness to them, they only brought in Carson Wentz this year to try and see if they can get anything out of him. But it looks like they're going to have to go to the drawing board again on quarterback, and they'll probably bring in someone brutal again, like Daniel Jones or Baker Mayfield, whoever's there in free agency. They're just going to be looking for a quarterback.
I just love that Michaela called Baker Mayfield brutal. That's fantastic.
Oh my god, yeah, I did. No, he's just inconsistent. So I know he's gonna be okay now at LA, and then he's gonna go to the Commanders, and then he's just gonna be really bad, and then he's gonna leave.
It's funny, yeah, because Taylor Heineke was on the commercials for next year's season tickets for the Commanders. So that'll be interesting to see what happens there. Let's jump in and talk about the playoffs. So we're gonna give our the one matchup that we're looking forward to seeing in the playoffs. Mark, have I got that correct, or have I completely spoofed that? You tell me.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like using these playoff generators and seeing what it throws up for you. Or that's how I approach the
Can I
game.
tell you what game I'm excited for, Mark? Just to start
Far
off with,
away, yeah.
as it stands, the Giants going to San Francisco. The 6th seed Giants going to
To
number.
get
No,
smacked
no,
around. That's
no,
why you're
no, no,
interested.
no, no. Oh, absolutely not, myth. Because they've won 8 games. This is an 8 or 9 win team going to San Francisco that have lost both their quarterbacks this season. Hell, they've lost Jimmy. They've lost Trey. No, no. I want to see Daniel Jones play for his life. I think it'd be a great game because it's just funny. You're starting to see all the conversation come out now. Oh, Daniel Jones has done enough to stay on over a year. It's like, lads, when are we going to get over this fallacy? I, as a Broncos fan, have sat for years watching Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, all this mediocrity. At least Trevor Siemian has a ring, to be fair to him. And yes, Daniel Jones has made a significant effort this year to try and show that he is the quarterback, and he's been put in a number of situations over the years where it's been difficult for him to do that. But the reality is, you can't just click your fingers and start it together in year 5 or whatever. It's not for me. But I'm very intrigued to see this game because this Giants team should be able to go up against this Giants defense or this Niners defense, which is great. I want to see Saquon make them sweat. But hypothetically, and the odds are very much stacked against them. But if Brian Dable's built up a team here, they need to go in. And Wink Martindale needs to find a way to stop Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Debo, Brandon Ayuk. So I very much look forward to this because it's a playoff game. Everyone's watching it. It deserves the attention that it gets, and they're there for a reason. So I look forward to it. Big time.
Yeah. No, when you say it like that, look, the whole figuring out of the playoffs will be to beat the 49ers. Look, the Eagles will be red hot favorites in any game they're in. I think it'd be a real shame if we don't get the 49ers Eagles in the NFC Championship game because they're far and away the best two teams, and that would be unpredictable. That's going to be a 1-point spread, especially if Jalen Hurts is obviously injured. When it comes to the 49ers, I think it'd be a shame if they were to be knocked out. I think best case scenario is actually if they end up in the number 2 seed, which I would have them getting into the number 2 seed, especially if the Packers are able to knock the Vikings off like the 49ers are like tipping at their toes. But I think, yeah, look, if you go back to the Giants of the first few weeks of the season, if we're able to run that thing back, yeah, great. But I think that the NFL has been able to figure out what they're about. So that's why they've been struggling in the last few weeks. Realistically, obviously, they're going to be making the playoffs. I think the Giants Vikings game would be the better matchup because it's two teams that, look, one of them will obviously have to progress, and that's going to annoy certain certain pockets of NFL fans that are saying that they're both frauds. So how do they get an NFL playoff win behind their belt? I don't really care so much for that. I think the Vikings would be able to come out of it. But if I was to put any kind of interest into playoff games, I think it's on the FC because the FC strong teams are obviously legitimately stronger. But if you had an LA Chargers play Jacksonville Jaguars as the 4th and 5th seed, I think that'd be excellent. Especially with the Trevor Lawrence, Justin Herbert storyline that would obviously be in it. Justin Herbert in the playoffs, they finally get there. It's all down to the coaching that they lost, but players play in the playoffs and be up to them to figure it out. The Jags would be obviously coming in very hard and definitely would be able to beat the Chargers. But I think that would be super exciting if that one was to come out. And then the Ravens versus the Bills replay of obviously a few years back when we got that seriously poor weather game when the Ravens just completely fell apart. We figured out that all it was Lamar had no accuracy and he had to hear about it for a whole off season, that they only had a run game and that's all he was worth. So I think in the AFC there's some really bona fide massive matchups. I don't think the NFC touches it, especially in the wildcard round. That those are the ones that I'd be excited for. I think it's Justin Herbert and Trevor Lawrence specifically playing against one another. Not the future of the NFL. Obviously, the future.
Staley's jaw could be on the line there, big time.
Yeah, 100%. If he was to lose that, coming off. Yeah, no, 100%. You're dead right. Staley could lose that, but then it's like the other one be, I guess, the Steelers Bengals in that scenario. But yeah, and also Dallas playing the Panthers, who I still have topping that group. Especially this week, we might talk some picks later on, so I'll park it. But yeah.
Wow.
That's my pick.
Michaela, it's clear that we're going to have upsets in the playoffs. And I genuinely mean what I say about that Niners-Giants game. If it was to stand, I agree with Mark. It would look maybe more than likely it could be Vikings against the Giants. Um, but yeah, there's some really, really good matchups in the AFC as well, potentially. And we're only 2 weeks away from this madness starting. So I would get caught up in your sleep now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the playoff picture now. As it stands, these would who everyone would be playing. So Herbert and Burrow will be playing each other. The Chargers would be playing the Bengals, and I think if that was to stick around, that would probably be the game of the playoffs because we all obviously rate both of those quarterbacks really, really highly. Like Joe Burrow is still in MVP talks at the moment. Herbert isn't, but he's still a great quarterback and we all really like him and he will get an MVP at some point in his career. So I would personally love to see that matchup because I think Mark's right is that the NFC doesn't touch the AFC in terms of teams and matchups because there is some frauds in the NFC. Like I don't think the Giants are frauds. I like it would be nice if like the 7th seed of say the Jaguars, or it'd be really fun if the Jaguars and say the Giants got to the divisional rounds, or not even not the divisional rounds, the championship games. Like that would be like I don't think it's going to happen, but it'd be really, really surprising and exciting if it did. But for me, I'd be looking at kind of like Herbert and Burrow matchup. I think that would be really fun if it. I hope it does happen. That would be my game to watch.
Absolutely. And right, we've got two more topics. That the first one we're going to look at is this whole talk about the MVP race. Justin Jefferson came out basically talking to ESPN at the weekend saying, as far as he's concerned with the form that he has so far this season, he should be considered for it. Mark, I'll add you another name, Bosa.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want me to talk about it, like I'm definitely one of those people that I don't care that the quarterback wins each year because they are so important. Like when we talk about games, it's always, yeah, especially in Bose is an interesting one because you saw what Christian McCaffrey is doing on their offense. Like they've bona fide studs all over the place. So yeah, he's been absolutely savage. But like Aaron Donald has been like people are calling Aaron Donald perhaps the greatest player of all time in the NFL. That like that's been the talk this season, and he can't win an MVP. Like he's been so dominant as what 3 in a row now, defensive player of the year, and he can't win an MVP. So I don't mind at all that the quarterback seems to always win it because at the end of the day, they are the most important player. My stance has changed on that in the last few years, but when you see what Jalen Hurts, how he's transformed the Eagles this year, and then we'd be, we're saying how can we start neglecting Patrick Mahomes in the conversation? I know he was always the number 2 or number 1 favorite to win it, but when it comes to Justin Jefferson, I suppose RG3 had a tweet out, and I'm after losing now my stupidity. I closed the tab, but basically saying like he's putting up numbers now that should see him win the MVP. But like last year, we had Cooper Kupp get the triple crown of receiving touchdowns and catches. Right? Wasn't that the other one that to make up the triple crown? And he doesn't go and win it. I can see
I
you want to
guess
say
this year though,
something.
you got the top 5, haven't you? So they're going to announce the top 5 names. I think I think he's got a serious case for the MVP award this season. I
So
genuinely do.
my other thing is like at the beginning of the season he wasn't scoring touchdowns. There was a 6 game stretch that he had 1 touchdown. It was a rushing touchdown in there. I think what was it, week 3 or something. So it's like like it's not like he's blowing us away with his touchdown numbers. If I pull it up real fast in front of us, I think like he has the 8 touchdowns, but that doesn't top the league or anything. Like the Vikings are confined to him. Like don't get me wrong, it's a great offense. He's absolutely the best player on his team. And we were in London, we couldn't wait to see him out there. Obviously, Dalvin Cook now obviously opens up with the run game what they can do. But when you start talking about, oh, he's going to set a new NFL record, it's like I really think now since we went away from the 16 to 17 game slate that we should be talking in terms of yards per game, because then he doesn't have the record. Is the extra game has definitely helped him out in terms of if he does own the NFL record for most receiving yards of all time. It's not on a per game basis, which I do think that that's worth something. And at the end of the day, it's an extra 10 yards per game over the number 2 behind him in the NFL right now. So no, don't get me wrong, he's a serious player. Like, but if Tyreek Hill is playing for anyone not alongside Jalen Hurts, he probably has more yards than Justin Jefferson, and he would have the more touchdowns as well. So like, I just think it's too obvious to give it to a defensive player or to the MVP or to a quarterback.
Michaela, I'm a big believer in sharing the love, and I feel that they should share the love with this award. What's your thoughts?
I think it's, if you were to think about it now, I think there's the three awards. Obviously, the big three would be Defensive Player of the Year, which is obviously only for defensive players, Offensive Players of the Year, and they should just rename MVP to the Quarterback Award, because I do understand why it's kind of like there is guys who can show that they're more important than the quarterback, but at the end of the day, it's kind of like the quarterbacks who win the MVPs always have amazing stats. Like when Mahomes had that 50 touchdown season and he got the MVP. It's kind of like the sports, they are the most valuable player in the sport. They would be seen as they should be the most valuable player on every team. Now, obviously they're not. I'd say Justin Jefferson is obviously more valuable than Kirk Cousins, but there is already awards for the offensive player. Like the quarterbacks don't win the offensive player of the year award. It always goes to a receiver or a running back. And then obviously the defensive players of the year have their award. So the MVP is just always kind of reserved for a quarterback. And I agree with Mark. His touchdown numbers aren't enough to warrant him an MVP. Like I know he has like nearly 1,800 yards, and like that's, if he gets 2,000, that would be absolutely amazing. But I'm like, okay, if he has 2,000 yards and maybe 20 touchdowns, let's talk about him being an MVP. But 8 touchdowns is not enough to warrant an MVP award. It's going to be probably Burrow. If Burrow still plays red hot and gets really far into the playoffs, it'll be him, it'll be Patrick Mahomes, and it'll be Jalen Hurts. I don't like this. I know I'm biased with Jalen, but I don't like this talk of he's been out one game and people are already forgetting about him. I don't want them to play injured, because I really don't want them to get even more injured and miss more time. But it infuriates me that the guy who's the front runner, because Patrick Mahomes dropped off a little bit, kind of with the interception. So the guy who was the front runner, has now kind of been forgotten about by everybody because he hasn't been able to play one game, and it's kind of like, he's not going to be out as long as Carson Wentz. Remember that season Carson Wentz he should have been the MVP, but then he got injured and was out for the rest of the season. So no, I don't think Justin Jefferson is the MVP. It's always going to kind of go to a quarterback. It's just how it is. But at the end of the day, there is awards for wide receivers and defenders. So it's kind of like everyone.
I agree, but
everyone
I
gets an
don't think you
award.
should call the MVP if it's going to be
Yeah,
for quarterback.
look,
That's fair. Yeah, maybe the best quarterback or
There we go.
something like that. Like
it's the whole thing that the MVP
that'd be fair.
is the quarterback. Yeah, I feel like this is the thing that goes on that I'm not going to say, oh, we're smarter over in Europe or whatever, but like
I would say, Mark, 2015, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was a shadow of himself in 2015, and that Broncos defense carried that team to a championship.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely, but there are years where
it's every year. Like if it's Justin Jefferson this year, it's Derrick Henry the last number of years. You know, I would feel more hard done by that Derrick Henry didn't get one when he did have the 2,000 yards, and every single play was the ball in his hands, and like he essentially removed the need for a quarterback in Tennessee because everything was going through him. At least Justin Jefferson does rely on Kirk Cousins making the throw as well. And like I said, he's averaging 10 yards a game more than Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill obviously has Jalen Hurts, but it's like he's getting way more targets as well. Like I know it's when you start getting into the nitty gritty of it, that's why quarterback always wins, because their play is always, they have to make the play. Whereas Justin Jefferson depends on if he's getting the ball versus if Tyreek Hill is getting the ball, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, one thing I would say as well is kind of put these two players in front of people on the fan bases. Would you rather have Justin Jefferson on your team, or would you rather have Patrick Mahomes on your team? And you're 100% going to pick Patrick Mahomes every time, because the quarterback is the most position and it's the hardest position to find a franchise guy at. You can look at other wide receivers that are in the league now, like Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Jefferson. There's loads and loads of really, really great quality guys who are probably going to go on and be Hall of Famers. But then everyone knows it's harder to find a quarterback to lead your team for 10 or 20 years. So that's how you kind of end the argument. Would you rather have Justin Jefferson or Patrick Mahomes in your team? And everyone will go with Patrick Mahomes, no matter who their quarterback was.
I love recording with you when stuff happens. Derek Carr has just been benched for the Raiders. We'll talk about that next week. We've got our last topic
Let's
here.
get into it. Yeah, I'd almost would go into it. It's more important than Monday Night Football, is it or not? But no,
Oh, well,
well, it's
that's
not
a
more
sin.
important. Well, to bring us into Monday Night Football,
Go for it.
what are we even talking about it for? It's an absolute out and out savage matchup. I don't care who wins. I'm just glad that we're getting it because it's a real playoff game. I can't pick it. No, neither can Vegas. It's a 1 point swing in terms of the Bills. That could be a 1 point swing in favor of the Bengals. They're playing lights out. We're going to learn a lot about them. But are we going to learn a lot about them? Because they're obviously both gone to the playoffs. How much can they reveal? Like, it's coming down to seeding at the end of the day, but they know between themselves, the Chiefs, between themselves and the Chiefs in the AFC, it's going to go through them. Of course, a home field advantage for the Bills means, like, it's this game is for home field advantage essentially when they next meet up. I don't know, do these games this late in December always live up to the billing, just because they probably do have to hold a bit back, but at least they're holding it a bit back on their own terms versus Miami not being able to play Tua, like we were talking about earlier on, that kind of way. So I guess that's my stance, and I just don't know what we're going to get out of this game. That's on Monday night, and it's in Cincinnati as well.
I guess the thing that I'll say that we're going to get out of this game is, as it stands, the Bills have got the number 1 seed, and the Bills, the road to the Super Bowl runs through Buffalo, and Buffalo haven't ever won a Super Bowl. Anyone that's actually read into the history of this league will know that they've got so close so many times. Jim Kelly, a quarterback, some legendary teams that they've had, but they've got so close. And for me, this is the year that they have to do it, because it runs through, as it stands, it runs through Buffalo. I think if they go to Cincinnati on Monday night and win, I think they're going to the Super Bowl. I do. I don't think Kansas City can come into Buffalo and beat them.
Right,
However, if they go to Buffalo, if Buffalo go to Kansas City, I know they beat them in Kansas City. It's a completely different kettle of fish in January when you've pissed off Mahomes, when you've pissed off Juju and Travis Kelce on that offense. I think this is an absolutely huge game.
And that's exactly it, Michael. Like, you're dead right when you say it's going to be so different in January, by the pure virtue of it being January. Like, we saw the Bengals knock off the Chiefs last year, but it's like, was it a crazy game? Yeah, absolutely. And that's what happens in the playoffs. It just, like, all bets are off. So that's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, this might be a bit more low pace. Maybe it won't be, but it's like, what will it actually count for? Because when we're talking about the Packers and Vikings game, like, the Vikings will win the NFC North. They've been crowned already. But if it does end up as the number 2 seed playing the number 7 seed in the playoffs and the Packers go and beat them, it'll only matter about what happens in January. So the same goes for this game, that any of those 3 teams can beat one another come playoffs. It doesn't necessarily matter where it even is. That's what we're just saying, that, well, obviously to you, if the Chiefs go into Buffalo, they're not winning. Whereas teams, even though it's an absolute fortress in Kansas City, they've like, the Bengals showed they can be beaten there. So what does this game actually count for? It's a really exciting Monday Night Football game, but the playoffs are just going to get weird anyway.
Michaela, I will ask you this, and we'll go into this whole Derek Carr conversation after quickly. We'll see the crack. Who wins Monday night? Because it's the game of the year in terms of primetime football. I think it's bigger than the Chiefs against the Chargers. I'm trying to think of a bigger game we've had on primetime this year, especially Monday Night Football anyway. I wouldn't count week 1, the Super Bowl in Seattle, when Russell Wilson played against the Seahawks.
Probably the other biggest game. I don't know if it's just because I remember the
Cowboys Eagles, but even the Chiefs against the Bills within the 9:25 slot in CBS. Who's going to win Monday night?
Yeah, Bengals. I don't know. I'm just getting a good vibe off Joe Burrow, and I don't know. I know the Bills have kind of had their rough spot earlier in the season, and they've kind of come out of it. But they kind of shown that they've be beaten. I know the Bengals have as well, but I just fancy the Bengals more, to be honest. And I think this is going to be the AFC Championship game as well.
Okay.
But I'm going Bengals.
Derek Carr has been benched in Vegas. I love when this happens when we record. It's lovely. We've got an extra section at the bottom this week. I don't know how we're going to do it because it's been added to have. It probably isn't there. The most interesting point, Mark, is this. The Raiders signed the guy to a 3-year extension, $125.1 million extension in the offseason. But if the team cuts or trades him in the offseason this year, it's a dead cap hit of $5.62 million. He's gone. Surely.
Yeah, like, look, Why you'd bench him now is to protect him from injury, because there's a contract. Say he was to go out and get injured this week and he can't pass the physical come the third day of the new season, they'd owe him 40 million. So obviously they're protecting themselves against that, and it's absolutely a precursor to him being moved on from. I mean, what else can we say? Jared Stidham is the backup. Like they've nothing to play for. It's been a horrendous season. It was blamed on Josh McDaniels. Why wouldn't you get rid of Josh McDaniels? Because then the fallout was going to be on Derek Carr. He got his buddy Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams has a nice season, so it's kind of a bit weird. But like, yeah, there was obviously a massive thing expected from Las Vegas, and when these things don't go out, the owners get a bit annoyed. It's a shame for Derek Carr because had the craziest life in with the Raiders. He's the most he's the longest tenured quarterback in the AFC, which kind of shows the injection of youth that has happened a few years ago. And obviously he's been around for so long, but he has had one fantastic season, and then the rest has been question mark, question mark, question mark. Probably at this rate, he probably wants to move on himself, to be perfectly honest. Like it'll be tough for him in the beginning, but when Michaela's talking about who could say Washington get next year, it's like, would you want Derek Carr in your team? I mean, I don't have to worry about that as a Cardinals fan, I guess. But obviously he's going to be, seen as a big free agent, or I don't know how exactly it's going to have to work itself out via trade or whatever. But it's definitely an interesting one. I thought they were just going to stick with him for the rest of the season, but when you understand the injury guarantees and stuff like that, I guess that's what happens sometimes. Happens with Matt Ryan too,
Michaela, it's a really interesting one. Does this save McDaniel's job? I mean, it adds. There's so much talk about the money involved in Vegas, and that the owner's struggling and he can't fire McDaniels. Tom Brady. I think it's the only spot. I don't see how he goes to San Fran when you've got Purdy and Trey Lance and potentially Jimmy Garoppolo there. I don't see how he goes to Miami when currently you've got Tua there. I don't see how he goes to Arizona when you got Kyler Murray on a contract there. I don't see how he goes to the Jets when you got Robert Saleh there, but not Sean Payton. The Patriots, I don't see how he goes to the Patriots with Bill Belichick there.
No, if Brady is smart, which he is, he will stay clear of the Raiders, because don't get me wrong, I like Vegas. Well, I've only recently moved to Vegas. I like the fan base, but I think the Raiders are a very chaotic franchise. I don't think they're a bad franchise like, say, Washington, but I think they're just a bit chaotic. And I think if money wasn't involved, I don't know, obviously, the owner's financial situation, but if money wasn't involved, just clean slate, get rid of McDaniels, and, might as well get rid of Carr. I think Carr probably does want to leave as well. I would kind of be fed up with this kind of, is he or is he not the quarterback? Like, it's kind of annoying, because I did think the Raiders were going to have a good season, especially after getting Devontae Adams. But I think, if Carr gets cut or traded or whatever, I think he could be like a Jimmy G. Like Jimmy G seems to come in, and he seems to be, his biggest thing for me and how he wins games is his leadership and his game management abilities. So I think Carr could be a similar guy for another NFL team, and I would like him going to possibly the Giants or something like that. But yeah, I think I don't know. If I was Carr, I'd want a new start, because it's just obviously not working out in Las Vegas for him. So go to another team and actually be,
when you talk about what the
Raiders
will do. I mean, if you're listening to this as a Chicago Bears fan, they hold the number 2 overall pick at the moment. Obviously, they're sorted with their quarterback with Justin Fields. It's been very apparent that the next team, the draft, was going to be the Raiders, that are like absolutely going for a quarterback. Now this has been cemented that I'd imagine they trade up into that number 2 spot. But if you're the likes of the Carolina Panthers or something like that, they're going to have to get ahead. So Chicago Bears fans are really licking their chops. Maybe the likes of the Cardinals. I think you have to, when you're going for the quarterback, you have to jump as high as you can. Obviously, the Houston Texans hold the number 1. They're going to be going for, I don't know, it's CJ Stroud or whatever. But I think that number 2 to get ahead of, I suppose, the Colts are sitting at number 5 currently. But you're not going to just trade in. The Cardinals sit at number 4. So the draft talk that we're going to be talking about for months, I think that just heated up, right?
I think as somebody that works in the league, and I'm very lucky to work on the league on a daily basis. I'm delighted this is happening now, because this is all going to be sorted out very quickly in March, and I can go and sleep for a month, and I'm very excited. However, I'm going to say exclusively here on this show and nowhere else, and I'm going to screenshot this at this moment at 7:24 on the 20th of December 2022. Tom Brady will be the QB1 of the Raiders next season. He will. I think if you look at I think if you look at the teams that are prepared to challenge and be in a situation where you can go, like, you know, like I can see the Raiders getting into like a wild card position at the very, very worst next season if they start out certain positions. I think Brady in Vegas is a home run. They wanted him 2 years ago before he went to Tampa. It's widely known of that fact. I think we're going to see Tom Brady.
But are they 1 year away? Are they a quarterback away? That's the problem with the Raiders, because if you go with Tom Brady, you're literally pushing the quarterback down 1 more year. Whereas if you just make the trade up now, you know, you still have the guy in the building. At least you have the contract there, because there's no point playing around with a quarterback contract. You know, however they were to sign a Tom Brady, I think like they never went full rebuild, or they haven't. This wouldn't be a full rebuild. It's just go out and have a quarterback. I'm not sure Davante Adams' contract. Obviously, he signed a massive one this off season. Obviously,
he's his friend as well.
Pardon me.
To be with his buddy as well in Vegas.
Yeah, well, look, and the Josh Jacobs, like, does this throw that into doubt? Like, I thought you have to keep Josh Jacobs after the season that he's had. Maybe they just do decide to blow it up and they keep the Davante Adams around. But I just don't think they can mess around with Tom Brady. A Kyle Shannon offense can play around with Tom Brady, especially if they get to a Super Bowl this year and then they're let down just by the quarterback once more. But I just think that the Raiders, they have to think about their future. They're not just the quarterback away, you'd imagine, from a Super Bowl. They're not just a Tom Brady away from a Super Bowl.
Would you rather win one ring in 15 years with Tom Brady as your quarterback or win nothing?
I don't think they will win it, though, next year is the problem. You know, that's like if they were that close, they would have pulled it off.
Yeah,
they wouldn't have pulled it off, but you know, they should have been more aggressive 2 years ago. I suppose everyone knew that.
But we all know, regardless of age, if Brady comes in, it changes the mantra around an organization. It's like if Mbappe walked into Man United
and they saved the draft picks. Like, I can see where you come from. Is like you're like, I just don't know if they're that close. Like they could on paper. Like this year, we're sorry, Michaela, I want to let you in.
I'm trying to think. I know the Raiders have a lot of stars, as in Davante Adams, and they had Chandler Jones, who in fairness hasn't had a good season, but he's still a star in the NFL. I think he'll probably bounce back next year. But is Brady leaving the Bucs and going to the Raiders a better situation with better players? I wouldn't say so. I think the Buccaneers are just like, you'd be like, oh yeah, he's gone for Davante Adams. But I'm like, well, he has Mike Evans right there, and he has Chris Godwin, and he can bring in whoever he kind of wants. We all know OBJ wants to play with Tom Brady, so like, for me, I'm kind of like, no, Brady should stay away from the Raiders. You don't want to do this. If he goes into the Raiders, it's not going to win them the Super Bowl, and I think he knows that. I think he knows the Raiders are a bit of a chaotic, like I said, franchise. So no, I don't think the Raiders have a better situation. I don't think they have a better head coach than the Buccaneers. So if I was Brady and you were putting in front of me Buccaneers,
well, I watched that game
Raiders
on Sunday, and Jesus Christ, I'll be sitting someday on my deathbed and I'll be asking for those 3 hours and 27 minutes back.
They don't.
It's Vegas.
They don't have cap space as of right now. I don't know exactly what happens with Derek Carr's contract, and I don't know what players they can release. You're right. The familiarity with McDaniel or with McDaniel means that Brady gets to call his own shots. Like that's why he moved to Tampa Bay, because he wanted to be able to call his own shots this year with Todd Bowles as head coach, and that's why he got rid of Bruce Arians. He wanted to call his own shots. That's what would lure him to Las Vegas. You're dead right. I just don't know, is it the smartest thing for?
I think the opportunity. I think at this point, when he's won that many rings, I think the opportunity to go to Vegas, to play in Vegas, to play for the iconic franchise, a guy from California. I think at that stage in his career, I think he may take it.
Yeah, they're in play. I hope for Raiders
fans. They are. And we're all not like. I mean, we've give different options here. And sorry to jump in this conversation, but they are 100% in play. They will definitely be an option, and he will look at the Raiders. It's going to be a hell of an offseason, folks. I think we're going to have a few. How does
that work with the kids? The 3 day a week with the kids?
Yeah, you were just saying 3 day a week. I don't think Giselle will be very
happy. Sure, the lad retired for 4 weeks and moved back. Sure, look, Ronaldo Jr. is in Madrid at the minute, and apparently Cristiano's in Saudi Arabia. Anything can work. I don't know, but that before we round up here, any picks for the weekends? I'm going to take the Bills beating the Bengals in Cincinnati. I think that's the game that I'm looking forward to the most, and I do think the Packers beat the Vikings. Just realizing now the Packers close out the season with 2 home games. That's nice.
Yeah, nice for them. I think the game, I think you're right. I'm going Bengals over Bills, but the other one is the Bucks Panthers game that I wanted to see for a few weeks, that they both control their own destiny. That happens this week. So that's where, and then the Vikings Packers game. I think that's very exciting as well. The Packers, if they're able to knock off the Vikings, we all love to see the Vikings lose apparently at the moment.
Michaela, who have you got this week?
I'm not loving this schedule.
It's
I'm
almost like
looking
you
at it
can
right
just
now,
fast
and it's
forward a
kind of
week,
like
isn't it? You
good
can just go
teams
to week
playing
18 with a lot of these
mediocre or
teams.
really bad teams. Yeah, well, like there is obviously, I think for some, like if the Lions need to stay in, the Jaguars need to beat the Texans, and the Lions need to win, and the Panthers all need to win to stay in their playoff hopes. But I'm kind of like, they're not playing fun teams. Like the Panthers are playing the Buccaneers, and Michael hates the
They're
Buccaneers.
so bad,
Apparently,
Michaela. They're
he
so
must give
bad.
out about them every week. They are really bad, in fairness. I'm gonna be like really boring and just say, yeah, the only game that stands out is the Bengals and the Bills. Like that's the only really, really, really good matchup. Obviously, as an Eagles fan, this might actually be an interesting game, because if the Eagles beat the Saints, they should beat the Saints very easily. If they beat the Saints, they'll secure the number 1 seed 100%. Which means, wouldn't they? They'd secure the number 1 seed if they beat the Saints. Yeah. So if they do that, then they can obviously rest Jalen, and they can rest AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. So yeah, that'd be interesting just for them to see if they can, tie everything up. But yeah, the only really, really standout fun game of the week is definitely the Bengals and
We
the
saw
Bills.
Steve
I'm
Wilkes
gonna,
when he came
go
in with
against you and
Carolina,
say the
gave
Bengals are gonna win.
the Panthers a bump. We saw Jeff Saturday give the Colts a bump. We know that the Broncos ran the Chiefs close in a few weeks back. Michael, can the Broncos pull off with now that Nathaniel Hackett's gone beat the Chiefs?
Indeedy, my friend, indeedy. This has been great crack, and I would envisage anybody that's watching this or listening to this, please check us out on all social media at NFL Ireland. Just search Pro Football Ireland. Jeff Reinbold's coming to Ireland, coming to Belfast. In fact, Belfast on the 2nd of February, potentially somewhere else as well. Check out profootball.ie for more information on tickets. It may be sold out already. If you're watching the game this weekend, enjoy it. If you're heading out to a game, enjoy it even more. We'll be back Monday morning, bright and early, to recap week 17 and look ahead to a huge week 18. For now, Song of Foil, thanks a million.